to the cloud. All right, looks like we're recording. Yes. All right, welcome everybody. This is the Cloud Provider monthly meeting, Cloud Provider vSphere monthly meeting. Today is April 3rd, 2019, and we do have a light agenda as usual we're gonna go through. So first thing first, we have a review of progress from the previous meeting. So last time we started doing the grooming for the backlog that we had. So last time we set a milestone called V Beta 1 that was supposed to be due last week. We actually changed that milestone, and well, first of all, we named that V1 Alpha 2 instead of Beta because we thought it would have been probably easier to still name it Alpha, since some of the changes that were made could have potentially, be a little unstable. And after a conversation that we had probably yesterday, we do have a proposal to split the repo up and have CSI live on its own repo. This is a thing that Travis, David, and I have discussed with other folks from VMware that are working on the in-tree Cloud Provider. And given that most of the focus for the new development is going to move to this new audit tree repos, we're trying to figure out what is the best way to split up the CSI and CCM work and be able to release these two things independently instead of having them in a single repo. Problem here is that there's no precedent in the community right now. So there's a cap number 2 that kind of dictated to have all the components living in the same repo. So CSI living with CCM, which is the current status quo. But we want to take this to SIG Cloud Provider and challenge that decision, potentially made an amendment to the cap or propose a new cap altogether, and be able to split that up and move the CSI component to a different repo under Kubernetes org.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Andrew. Feel free.
Can a submodule be a loophole in the existing cap?
I don't know the details because I haven't actually been involved a lot with the submodule thing. I actually try to steer away from it as much as possible.
Yeah. So just real quick, submodules in Git are very different than Subversion, much as I found out many years ago when I started with Git. It's not like a moving pointer. It's actually, it points to a specific commit. So you actually have to update it, much like a Go dependency, right? A Go module dependency. So in that way, I mean, it is very much pointing to a specific hash of the CSI. So like, it would be very interesting to find out if that would be, I'm trying to do path of least resistance. And if that works, it would actually continue to not affect the CCM builds, because they very much right at the moment do test or build and use the CSI bits.
So we're not at the, so right now we're still proposing the change. We want to make sure that this is something that can be replicated, because we're not the only provider that has multiple binaries hosted in the same repo. So like OpenStack being the prime example. OpenStack has something like 9 different binaries being built out of the same Cloud Provider OpenStack repo. So we're trying to say, hey, maybe this is not the right thing to do. Maybe, going forward we should have, we should have separated repos for all this, let's call them binaries, let's call them, plugins for cloud providers. So we're trying to set a precedent there. And there's also a different problem which stems from the fact that Cloud Provider Star, so Cloud Provider vSphere, as well as Azure or OpenStack and others, are living under the Kubernetes core organization, while pretty much everything else is living under the Kubernetes SIG organization on GitHub. So we're trying to get a consensus on what is the right thing to do in terms of splitting up these projects. Once we have that, and we reach a consensus of that, then we're going to figure out how to implement that. And implement it for us might be using submodules. I don't know if that's the right answer, but we want to evaluate all the options that we have. But right now, I think as a group, we thought that splitting up into repos will be the good thing to do, and we want to take this to cloud provider. Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you put that on the agenda for today's meeting for SIG cloud provider, right?
That's correct. I'll be there this afternoon asking them about it, and hopefully we'll get a quick enough turnaround where I can come away from today's meeting with enough information to turn around, like you said, whether it's a new CAP or an amended CAP, to come back to them 2 weeks later. Or that's the goal.
Awesome. So to reflect that proposal and decision to split that up, we decided to remove the milestone date, the due date. So right now we still have the milestone. We still have a couple of open issues that we want to go over, and we're going to do that today. But currently we don't have like a set release date for the next version of it, since it's probably going to be the next version is going to be released separately. So we're going to have a CCM version, version 0.20, and then we're going to have CSI independently released on a different schedule, a different potentially even release version, like V01X. So that's pretty much what happened in terms of new things. Let's go over to GitHub and take a look at the current status of the repo. So we have the two milestones here. I made the change here, so we have V1 Alpha 2. I just want to quickly go over one issue that I closed today, which is this one. Andrew, given that you're here, I just want to get a feedback from you. So I went through the issue that was open a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I felt
David
like
updated it recently.
Yeah, I felt like, judging from David's comment, and you referenced this in a PR that you merged, 26 days ago. Looks like the bulk of this issue was addressed already. So I felt like it was something that we could have, easily closed.
I feel like if you want to close this and reference it to the actual work, because it's fairly vague, like what is the E-to-E tests? At the moment, you could run the conformance tests against the, if you do make integration test and it spins up a kind cluster with the CCM side loaded into it, you could run the E-to-E suite against that. So I feel like this could be closed, and then if you want to highlight specific things like conformance against VCSIM or specific feature tests against VCSIM.
I think this originally was created, very early on. So this is from August last year.
Yeah.
So this was probably just, and this was me opening it, so I should probably have some more context on this. But ideally, if I remember correctly at the time, we want to have just basic E2E tests. So the idea was we want to, hook into Prowl, have a job there, have VCSIM fulfill some sort of E2E test with the code that we have.
That's the problem. We don't have any E2E tests at the moment, as far as I am aware. I'm probably wrong about that, but I'm reading what you have there. It does validate that it can load into the CCM, which is technically end-to-end, into a cluster, but it doesn't execute any E-to-E feature tests. Running the conformance suite against that would still be take too much time for a PR. So if somebody wants to create an actual E-to-E test that, and again, I don't know what that is against the CCM.
I think this was more like, you actually got the point that I was trying to get to. This means, get initial support for it. So if we can sideload it.
Yep, we do. We do it today. Every PR does that.
And we know that it can be sideloaded and it works. That is, to me, like the very basic baseline of an E2E test.
Yep. It verifies that the tank gets removed.
Yep. So I think that is, my definition of, the initial E2E test for this. And, since this was created almost a year ago. I think this definitely fits the bill. So this, I had like a 3 checkboxes here: implement E2E test using vSystem, make file, we do have it now, and the new job in test infra. So I think, I closed this before the meeting because I thought, by reading the comments here, it was, good enough. So I think we can just keep it closed. And, right now we can potentially open up new issues like for more granular, E2E test. If you want to implement something specifically to test in the E2E part, we want to, create that and have a PR specifically for it.
I think all the hard work's been done, or fun, hard/work, whatever's been done. I think at this point there's a good good guidelines that people can follow if they need or / want to do that. The only thing I mean, for future work that I'd be interested in, and I actually, there's an outstanding PR in Kind to be able to build Kind images from existing CI builds of Kubernetes. I am interested in eventually, and this is something is Doug on the call? Yeah, hey Doug. It is something I'm interested in doing for PRs where we build against, run the integration test against multiple versions of Kubernetes with Kind. Again, it's important that Kind PR gets merged so we can actually use multiple versions of Kubernetes. But also, and this is, I think, outstanding work that has to be done. Again, Doug is going to have to comment on that. Being able to configure vSystem to act as if it is vCenter 5.5, vCenter 6.0, because at some point that gets really important. Because now that everything's external, we're talking about a build matrix, not just versions of Kubernetes. That's something I've been harping on now for, it seems like 8 months. There's so many, and now that CSI is external, there's so many different components that have to slot together.
Yeah. Do we have an overarching issue open that describes the need for have something like a matrix of testing and what
I outlined it. I created a document for it in a build meeting. I'll share it on the, and maybe we
can put that in the meeting notes.
Yeah,
so maybe
I'll
take an action to like create an issue in the repo and say, we have, this amount of work we have to do. And there's probably a lot of upstream changes that have to happen, maybe in vSystem, like supporting multiple API version. I'm pretty sure that support is somewhere, but maybe it's not fully baked in. I don't know. But there's definitely, some ramifications to implement something like that. But it's definitely very important going, going forward after there's another like side conversation happening that is not necessarily that doesn't necessarily have to do with the auto tree stuff, but the in-tree vSphere cloud provider is scheduled to be staged in staging for 1.15. So we do have an outstanding PR that Andrew Sakim is working on. So we're getting closer and closer to the removal of the actual code from KK. So we need to, start grouping and rally around these, testing efforts to make sure that when we get to the point where in-tree is fully deprecated and it's going to be, thrown out of KK, no longer available, we have, fully tested CSI, CCM, all working together for the version that we want to support. All right. So for the open issues that we have, I just added the explore splitting CSI plugin into a separate repo because I want to have this, as part of this milestone. So before we want to close this milestone, we want to have the split happen. So that's why I put this in here. So we talked about this.
Yeah, that'd be something I'd be willing to talk about. Like I was definitely picturing doing it right after, just mostly because we're mostly feature complete for what I was picturing for this next tagged version. Doesn't have to be. It's not important in any way, but I was definitely picturing the opposite. But mostly, I guess, probably to get this out and like have a clean breaking point. Because otherwise, there's a few months of things that have gone in there that we won't be able to release with the tagged version for, I don't know, another 3 or 4 weeks, maybe until we get a new repo, however long that takes. 2 to 3 weeks at the minimum, I would think. So it just depends on timing, I guess.
Yeah, so I hear you. And actually thought about doing this. I wanted to, so the main rationale behind it is that we do have this call once a month, and technically speaking, we're starting the process of splitting up the repo today, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that if we want to have, we know that the CCM has, a longer history of being out there because it's been there for like 7 to 8 months now, pretty much, from the very first release that we had. And CSI will be on a different release schedule, coming soon. Also, we're going to have more people joining in working on the provider itself. So we want to make sure that we have the first release that we cut that has all these new features, which is, the release that we're talking about here, because this new release is going to have a lot more features than the previous one had, the previous one that we cut in December. That's why I was hesitant in cutting a release first and then doing the split. I want to make sure that we separate at this point where we have a CCM that is pretty much feature complete, and everything that we add after this release is going to be net new improvements. It's not going to be something that we're backporting or we're filling the gap from entry. It's something that is going to be net new. I actually have an item I want to talk about after. So I want to make the separation very clean. So I want to make sure that once we have that, it's going to be, this is what we got there. This is the feature parity version of CCM with entry. And the next version is going to be all new work, all new features, all new support, whatever it's going to be. And CSI, same thing. Same CSI is going to be, on its own release train. And maybe it's going to take longer to get to beta. Maybe it's going to take, a different, release schedule. Maybe, sync up with the next 1.16 version of Kubernetes. I don't know. That's why I wanted to have the separation. And if that separation doesn't happen because of something, like something comes up and we get a pushback from community, we're not able to do it, then we can regroup by the next meeting a month from now and decide if we want to cut in or not, since the feature work is going to be complete as it stands for this backlog here that we're looking at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It makes sense to me.
Awesome. So let's go over these outstanding issues here. I think this is the one we briefly talked about, Travis, right? This is the test for VMC.
Yeah, I mean, this would be doing end-to-end testing for the CSI plugin on VMC. Thanks to all of Andrew's hard work, there's a lot of things that make this possible when it wasn't a couple of weeks ago. Though it'll be interesting in that, as part of the repo split, we'll have to set up a whole new prow job through test infra, and all of that kind of has to start over. I mean, it can very much build off of what was done for the cloud provider repo, but it's a whole new repo to do its own CI. So that adds some work there. But yeah, this is still in progress.
Schedule a 30-minute call with me and we'll get that set up together once the repo's there. I'll help you with that.
And I think, like I said, I think the soonest we're going to get a repo would be 2 to 3 weeks. And I say that because I think it would be working with cloud provider, SIG cloud provider, to define how that's going to look. That will happen, I think, until at least 2 weeks the next time they meet. And then I could come to a proposal and say, hey, I'd like to create a repo and file the PR for that. All of those hurdles.
Yeah, thankfully the repo creation has been automated since the last time we created a repo.
Yeah, and I knew that part. It's just, I think, getting the stakeholders to say, yes, you can have a repo. And then, yeah, once you actually go to do it, the repo creation is pretty straightforward as long as the right people /approve it. But I think it'll be a couple of weeks before we get a CAP amended or accepted that puts that structure in place that says, yes, you can have a repo for CSI.
All right, sounds good. David, do we have any news on this Helm chart?
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself. No, I don't have anything, any updates for it yet.
Okay, I think if we regroup by the next time and we don't have like new news on this one, maybe we can drop it from. It's not strictly a feature of the CCM is just, obviously a very nice way of deploying it. So
yeah, and it's actually really, I just haven't had time. I've been pulled off that to work on other things, and I just really haven't had time to go back and like re-engage and try to figure out what's going on with it.
all right, let me just add a note here. Not closed by. We're going to have our next one on May 1st. Am I right? Yeah, it's going to be May 1st. Reminder. All right. And the documentation, I know that Andrew has done some work, but I don't think we have Andrew here today. So maybe we'll defer to an offline conversation and see if that moved forward. Before ending the meeting, I just want to bring up one thing that came to mind after some discussions internally. We do have some work that was done by Anthony when he was at VMware on the scheduling plugin, so the affinity scheduling plugin. This was done as a proof of concept to kind of do affinity and anti-affinity rules in vSphere for nodes. So basically, you have VMs that are Kubernetes nodes, and by default they abide by the DRS rules, so they can be scheduled on the same physical host, which means that if you lose that host, you're going to lose potentially multiple VMs and multiple Kubernetes nodes. And this plugin was basically just annotating pods, etc., not to run on hosts that are collocated on the same physical node, and also create on the fly DRS rules that will prevent these nodes to be collocated on the same physical host. So there was some work and some consideration being done on that plugin, and I was wondering if it would make sense to have it as part of net new work for cloud provider vSphere for the CCM. I haven't actually. This is something that literally I just put out there without putting too much thought in it. I thought it would make sense potentially. So I'm wondering if anybody wants to take a look at that, as an item and see if there's a need for it, or if CCM is the right place to do it. Maybe keeping the separate plugin is the right way to do it. So I'm open to suggestions here, and I just put the link in the notes if people want to check it out. The work was done, I think it was completed about a year ago, so maybe it's not super updated with the latest Kubernetes versions, but it should be in working condition.
Have we heard any feedback or anything on people asking for this? Because I mean, it seems like a pretty important feature for stability, but do we ever hear anything?
So at the time, we've had some inquiries from customers of VMware that were using VMware and Kubernetes, and they were just throwing some VMs at their vSphere installs, and they were wondering what could be done in terms of making sure that HA is playing nice with Kubernetes. Because right now, the CCM reports back to vSphere, but does not involve any type of, let's say, modification on the VMs. It's just reporting back, basically. It's not making any changes to the infrastructure, to the vSphere infrastructure that it connects to. So this may be a way to create that link, and maybe an optional link at this point, and make sure that maybe the CCM can be the right point for this scheduling decision to happen.
Yeah, Fabi, I can take a look at that. Actually, about a year ago, when he was still on the team, I actually did take a look at this, and obviously it's been a long while since I've looked at it, but I can revisit it and take a look and just see if it's a viable thing.
Do you want to create like an issue on the repo, like exploring or discovery of this work. I haven't created anything. I just put it out there because the conversation at hand would literally happen this morning. So it's really fresh.
Yeah, I can create an issue just saying, looking, discovery work for affinity scheduling.
All right, because this seems like a sensible thing to have in the CCM. But again, yeah. All right. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And we're getting close to the end of the time slot. Does anybody have anything else they want to discuss? All right. Concerns? Anything else? Otherwise, we can wrap it up. All right. All right, folks. Have a nice
Thanks,
rest of the day.